Imagine you are standing on the edge of a mountain. Not a gentle slope. Not a path. A sheer cliff. Below you, the rock face drops straight down into darkness. Sharp stone. Jagged edges. A fall so steep that even looking down makes your stomach twist. Behind you, Roman soldiers are closing in. You can hear them now. Leather creaking. Metal scraping. The rhythmic stomp of disciplined feet. These are not scared men. These are professionals. They have hunted men like you for centuries. And then your leader turns to you. He doesn't scream. He doesn't beg. He points. Over the edge. And he says, "We go down." You think this is suicide. You think this is madness. You think this is the end. But what happens next will rewrite Roman military history forever. And here's the impossible question that should already be screaming in your head. How does an army with no armor, no weapons, and no escape route annihilate a Roman force trained to kill the world? Because that's exactly what Spartacus is about to do. And no, this is not the version you've heard before. Stay with me, because in the next hour you're going to witness 5 moments that sound like legend, but were recorded by Rome's own historians. You're going to see starving slaves turn kitchen knives into instruments of war. You're going to hear about a Roman commander so confident in his victory that he forgot to post guards, and paid for it with his life. You're going to watch an army vanish off a cliff, and reappear behind enemy lines like ghosts. You're going to experience a battle so brutal that survivors vomited from the smell alone. And finally, you're going to learn what Rome deliberately buried about Spartacus, because the truth was too dangerous to remember. But first, you need to understand how this nightmare even began. Because Spartacus was never supposed to exist. You are born in chains. Not metaphorically. Literally. Iron bites into your wrists the first time you understand what ownership means. The metal is cold, but the hands that place it there are warmer, and crueler. You don't even know your crime. You just know you belong to someone now. You are property. That is the first lesson Rome teaches you. Some sources say you were Thracian, taken from the northern borders where Rome's hunger for land never ends. Others say you were once a soldier yourself, forced to fight for Rome, then discarded like a broken tool when you resisted. What matters is this: you knew war before you knew slavery. And Rome turned that knowledge against you. You are sold. Transported. Marched with others who have already given up. You are taken to Capua. The Gladiator school. People imagine glory when they hear that word. Crowds. Cheers. Immortality. The truth is blood, rot, and screaming men who don't die fast enough. The first thing you smell when you enter the ludus isn't iron. It's old blood soaked into sand. Sweat that never fully dries. Fear. You are stripped. Examined. Measured. Your worth is calculated not by who you are, but by how long you might survive before dying for entertainment. And here's the part that never makes it into the movies. Most gladiators don't die in the arena. They die here. From infection. From beatings. From despair. Every night, you hear men crying quietly so the guards won't hear. Men who were farmers. Brothers. Sons. Men who still remember the faces of their children. Spartacus listens. He watches. And he waits. Because something inside him refuses to die. Years pass. Or maybe months. Time loses meaning when every day is pain. But then something breaks. Not in Spartacus. In the system. The guards grow lazy. The trainers grow crueler. The owners grow richer. And one night, whispers spread through the barracks like fire through dry grass. Escape. Not tomorrow. Not someday. Now. The plan is suicidal. Laughable. Desperate. Kitchen knives. Meat cleavers. Spits from the cookhouse. Weapons meant to cut bread, turned toward men. About 70 of you move at once. No armor. No shields. Just rage. The first guard dies without a sound. A hand over his mouth. A blade through his throat. Warm blood sprays across your fingers, and something inside you changes. Fear doesn't disappear. But it moves aside. You don't fight like trained soldiers. You fight like animals backed into a corner. By the time the alarm is raised, it's already too late. You pour out of Capua and into the countryside like a wound bursting open. Rome laughs at first. 70 slaves? A joke. But laughter stops when villas burn. When patrols don't return. When messengers arrive pale and shaking. Because these aren't random killings. They're organized. Someone is leading. And that someone understands Roman warfare. Spartacus. More slaves join. Shepherds. Laborious. Runaways. Men who have nothing left to lose. Within weeks, you are hundreds. Then thousands. And Rome finally decides to act. But not seriously. They send a praetor named Gaius Claudius Glaber. Not a general. Not an elite force. A politician with ambition and something to prove. He marches his men toward Mount Vesuvius. This is important. Burn it into your mind. Vesuvius is not erupting yet. It is a dead, sleeping mountain. Steep sides. One narrow path to the top. Glaber doesn't see a battlefield. He sees a trap. You, the slaves, flee up the mountain. Or so it seems. Glaber smiles. He blocks the only path down. Posts his men. Sets up camp. He doesn't attack. Why would he? He believes you're already dead. No food. No water. No escape. Roman soldiers settle in. Helmets come off. Fires are lit. Guards are lax. Victory, they think, is inevitable. And this is where the story usually pauses. Because what happens next sounds impossible. Spartacus walks to the edge of the cliff. You follow. You look down, and your legs shake. The drop is insane. Not climbable. Not survivable. Some of the men start shouting. Others laugh hysterically. A few fall to their knees. This is the moment when most leaders would lie. Or retreat. Or surrender. Spartacus does something else. He looks at the mountain itself. And he sees something Rome never would. Vines. Wild grapevines cling to the rock face. Thick. Twisted. Overgrown. Nature's ropes. He orders you to cut them. Hands move fast now. Fear sharpens everything. Vines are twisted together, braided into long cords. One by one, men go over the edge. Not jumping. Descending. Sliding down the cliff face like insects. Your palms burn. Stone scrapes skin away. One man loses his grip and vanishes screaming into the dark. No one stops. Because stopping means death anyway. By the time night falls, the impossible has happened. An entire army has descended a cliff Rome thought impassable. And now you are behind them. Sleeping Romans. Unarmored. Unprepared. Confident. You don't scream when you charge. You don't need to. Steel hits flesh. Bones crack. Men wake up dying. Glaber's army collapses into chaos. Some try to fight. Some try to run. Some beg. It doesn't matter. By sunrise, the Roman camp is a slaughterhouse. Weapons are taken. Armor stripped from corpses. Standards ripped from the ground. You are no longer slaves with knives. You are an army. And Rome has just learned a lesson it will never forget. But don't get comfortable. Because this victory changes everything. Rome is done laughing. And the man they send next will not make the same mistakes. And neither will Spartacus. Because what he plans next will shock even his own men. And that is where the real nightmare begins. You wake up surrounded by the dead. The smell hits first. Blood isn't dramatic when it's fresh. It's metallic. Sweet. Heavy in the air. It coats the back of your throat and refuses to leave. Flies are already gathering, crawling into open mouths, clustering around wounds that are still warm. Roman soldiers lie twisted in the dirt, their discipline erased in a single night. Helmets cracked. Shields split. Faces frozen somewhere between sleep and terror. You should feel triumph. Instead, you feel something colder. Because you know Rome. And Rome does not forgive humiliation. Spartacus walks through the aftermath in silence. He doesn't celebrate. He doesn't shout victory. He studies the bodies like a teacher reviewing mistakes. He stops beside a young Roman officer. The man can't be more than 20. His throat is cut so cleanly it almost looks peaceful. Spartacus kneels. For a moment, you think he's praying. Then he takes the man's sword. Not as a trophy. As a promise. Because now everything has changed. You are no longer escaping. You are rebelling. And Rome will answer rebellion with annihilation. Word spreads faster than fire. Slaves run from fields and mines to join you. Entire work gangs disappear overnight. Shepherds abandon flocks. Criminals, deserters, debtors, men Rome has already discarded, flood toward Mount Vesuvius. Within weeks, you are no longer thousands. You are tens of thousands. And this is where hope becomes dangerous. Because armies don't run on courage. They run on food. Water. Order. And discipline is something slaves have never been allowed to learn. Fights break out over stolen armor. Men drink too much. Some want to stay and fortify Vesuvius. Others want revenge immediately, march on Capua, burn it, crucify every Roman they find. Spartacus listens to all of it. And then he does something unexpected. He stops them. He doesn't want glory. He wants survival. His plan is simple. Terrifying. Brilliant. Leave Italy. Cross the Alps. Scatter. Disappear. Rome can't enslave ghosts. But not everyone agrees. And this disagreement will tear the rebellion apart from the inside. Before that happens, Rome strikes again. This time, they don't send a politician. They send legions. 2 Roman commanders move against you, Publius Varinius and Lucius Cassinius. Men with experience. Men who understand what happened to Gladiator and refuse to repeat it. They don't underestimate you. They divide their forces. They probe. They cut off supply lines. They hunt instead of charging. And suddenly, the fear returns. You are chased across southern Italy like animals. But Spartacus adapts. He always adapts. When Varinius splits his army, Spartacus strikes the smaller detachment first. Ambushes. Night attacks. Hit and run. Roman discipline begins to crack. One night, Cassinius makes a mistake that will end his career, and his life. He believes Spartacus is retreating. He believes the slaves are exhausted. So he removes his armor and bathes in a nearby spring. That's when Spartacus attacks. You burst from the trees, weapons raised, screaming this time, not in fear, but in fury. Cassinius doesn't even make it out of the water. Roman soldiers scramble half-naked, slipping on wet stone, dying without ever forming ranks. It's not a battle. It's a massacre. And something else happens that night, something psychological. For the first time, Roman soldiers begin to fear you. Not as criminals. Not as slaves. As warriors. But fear cuts both ways. Because victory feeds arrogance. Some men now believe Spartacus is unstoppable. They stop listening. They stop training. They stop preparing. And Rome is watching. The Senate is humiliated. Italy is bleeding. Trade routes are unsafe. Villas burn. Tax revenue collapses. Allies whisper. This is no longer a slave revolt. This is a war. So Rome does what Rome always does when threatened. It escalates. They appoint Marcus Licinius Crassus. And if you don't know that name yet, you will by the end of this story. Crassus is not like the others. He is not careless. He is not merciful. And he does not lose. Crassus believes fear is the most effective weapon Rome has ever invented. And he intends to use it on his own men first. When a Roman unit retreats from Spartacus without orders, Crassus orders decimation. 1 in every 10 men is beaten to death by his own comrades. You need to understand what that does to an army. Imagine standing in a line while your friends draw lots. Imagine knowing that survival depends not on bravery, not on skill, but on chance. That's Roman discipline. And it works. Crassus rebuilds the legions into killing machines, while Spartacus faces a different problem. Division. Some of the men don't want to leave Italy. They want Rome to burn. Crixus, one of Spartacus' most powerful lieutenants, breaks away with tens of thousands. This is the moment that should make your stomach sink. Because Spartacus knows. Split forces mean death. Crixus marches south. Crassus intercepts him. The battle is short. Brutal. Final. Crixus dies fighting. His men are slaughtered. And Crassus does something deliberately cruel. He forces Roman prisoners to fight each other to the death, gladiator style, in mockery of Spartacus' past. This is not strategy. This is psychological warfare. When Spartacus learns what happened, witnesses say he doesn't speak for hours. Then he orders Roman prisoners executed. Not quickly. Publicly. The war has crossed a line. There is no going back now. Spartacus turns north again. The Alps are close. Freedom is visible. But the men hesitate. Some have families now. Loot. Power. Others believe they can defeat Rome outright. Spartacus is losing control. And Crassus is gaining ground. This is where everything collapses. Spartacus attempts to cross into Sicily, hoping to ignite another rebellion. Pirates promise transport. They take the gold. And then they vanish. Betrayed. Trapped again. Crassus builds walls, actual walls, across the Italian peninsula to contain you. Starvation returns. Winter bites. Men desert. And finally, the last battle comes. The one everyone remembers. Spartacus lines up his men. He rides forward, kills his own horse, and turns back. If I win, he says, I'll have plenty of horses. If I lose, I won't need one. The battle is chaos. No clever tricks. No cliffs. Just blood. Spartacus is wounded again and again, still fighting. Still pushing. Until he vanishes beneath Roman shields. His body is never found. And Rome claims victory. 6,000 survivors are crucified along the Appian Way. Miles of crosses. A forest of death. A warning. And yet, Rome still failed. Because you're still talking about Spartacus. Because Rome erased his body, but not his idea. Because every rebellion after this one echoes his name. And because now, you know the part they didn't want remembered. But there's more. Because historians lied. About the battle. About Spartacus. About what really terrified Rome. And in the next part, you're going to hear the human stories buried under the legend. The Roman soldier who survived the cliff attack, and never slept again. The slave woman who fought beside Spartacus until the end. And the one decision Spartacus made that doomed everything. Long after the fighting ends, the silence is worse than the noise. Roman soldiers learn this early. The clash of steel, the screaming, the chaos, that's familiar. That's survivable. But the silence that comes after a massacre, that's where minds begin to fracture. One Roman soldier survives Mount Vesuvius. His name never makes it into the histories. He's not a senator. Not a commander. Just a man who followed orders and lived when others didn't. He wakes beneath two bodies, crushed by their weight, their blood soaking into his tunic. One is still warm. The other is already stiff. He doesn't move. He listens. He hears boots. Bare feet. Laughter. A language that isn't Latin. He smells smoke. And blood. And something worse, fear that doesn't belong to him. When the voices fade, he crawls out. The camp is gone. Not looted. Erased. Tents flattened. Fires still smoking. Corpses stripped naked and piled like waste. He staggers for days before reaching a Roman outpost. When he finally speaks, officers dismiss him as hysterical. Slaves don't do this. Men like Spartacus don't exist. But nightmares don't care what Rome believes. That soldier never sleeps again. Every time he closes his eyes, he hears vines creaking against stone. Now understand this. Rome doesn't fear Spartacus because he kills Romans. Rome fears Spartacus because he exposes a lie. The lie is that order is natural. That hierarchy is inevitable. That some men are born to rule and others to obey. Spartacus proves that's nonsense. And that makes him dangerous beyond measure. Inside the rebel camp, things are changing too. This is the part of the story that feels uncomfortable, because revolutions are never clean. Not everyone who joins Spartacus is noble. Some are desperate. Some are violent. Some just want revenge. Spartacus knows this. He tries to impose discipline. He trains formations. He assigns officers. He punishes theft. He forbids the killing of civilians. But leadership over slaves is not the same as leadership over soldiers. These men have never been allowed structure that wasn't cruelty. And freedom is intoxicating. One night, a Roman merchant caravan is captured. The guards are killed quickly. But what happens next spirals. Some of the men want to release the slaves and let the merchants go. Others want blood. The argument turns physical. By the time Spartacus intervenes, 3 merchants are dead and a slave girl is sobbing in the dirt. Spartacus executes 2 of his own men that night. Publicly. It shocks everyone. This isn't Rome, they say. This isn't why we fought. Spartacus answers quietly. This is exactly why. Freedom without restraint becomes another kind of tyranny. This moment matters. Because it shows something historians gloss over. Spartacus isn't just reacting. He's trying to build something. And that's what terrifies Rome most of all. There is a woman in the camp. Her name is never recorded. Some sources say she was Thracian too. A priestess. Others say she was just another slave who survived long enough to matter. What we know is this. She fights. Not on the front lines. Not swinging blades. She tends wounds. Carries water. Whispers courage into men who are bleeding out and begging for their mothers. And when Spartacus doubts, he listens to her. She tells him his fate is already written, but not how Rome thinks. She tells him victory doesn't mean survival. She tells him legends don't need endings. When Spartacus rides north, toward the Alps, it feels like destiny finally aligning. The mountains rise ahead, cold, brutal, beautiful. Freedom is right there. But this is where psychology crushes strategy. Men hesitate. They've tasted power. They've taken Roman gold. Roman armor. Roman women. Freedom feels abstract compared to dominance. Crixus is the voice of that hunger. He says staying means victory. He says Rome bleeds. He says Spartacus is thinking too small. The split isn't sudden. It's a slow fracture. Arguments at night. Whispers. Loyalty eroding. When Crixus leaves, Spartacus watches him go. He doesn't stop him. That decision will haunt him forever. Because Crassus doesn't miss opportunities. He annihilates Crixus. And then he turns cruelty into theater. The mock gladiator games are not about punishment. They're about humiliation. They tell Spartacus, we own your past. We define your identity. Spartacus answers by executing prisoners. Rome gasps. But the damage is done. From this point on, mercy is dead. The pirates betray Spartacus because money matters more than revolutions. Crassus builds walls because he understands containment. And the men begin to starve. Hunger does something strange to the mind. It strips away ideals. It turns comrades into competitors. A man will kill for bread long before he dies for freedom. Desertions increase. Some sneak away at night. Some are caught. Spartacus orders fewer executions now. Not because he's softened, but because he can't afford to lose more men. The final battle approaches like a storm you can feel in your bones. Crassus lines up 8 legions. Disciplined. Armored. Relentless. Spartacus addresses his men. He doesn't promise survival. He promises meaning. When he kills his horse, it's not bravado. It's clarity. There is no retreat. What happens next is not glorious. It's not cinematic. It's bodies slamming together. Mud sucking at feet. Screams drowned by iron. Spartacus is wounded early. A spear through the thigh. He keeps fighting. Another wound. Then another. He pushes forward because stopping means being swallowed. He reaches Crassus' lines. Roman sources admit this reluctantly. Spartacus nearly reaches Crassus himself. Then he disappears. Not dramatically. He falls. And Rome never finds his body. That's not coincidence. That's erasure. 6,000 crosses line the Appian Way. Some men live for days. Some for hours. Crows gather. Rome thinks this will end the story. It doesn't. Because now we arrive at the lie. Rome claims Spartacus was a brute. A criminal. A threat that had to be crushed. But ask yourself this. Why erase his body? Why suppress details? Why make his death ambiguous? Because Rome understood something crucial. A martyr is dangerous. A legend is unstoppable. Spartacus becomes a ghost. A warning whispered to slaves. A story told quietly in kitchens and fields. A reminder that Rome can bleed. And now you are going to hear what history tried hardest to bury. In the next part, we go inside Rome itself. Inside the Senate. Inside the fear. Inside the moment they realized they didn't just defeat an army. They almost lost their world. Rome pretends it's over. That's the first lie. The Senate meets in marble halls polished by centuries of blood and tax money. Senators speak calmly. Measured. Controlled. Official records describe the revolt as contained. Resolved. An unfortunate disturbance. But behind closed doors, voices shake. Because every man in that room understands something they will never say out loud. 6,000 crosses didn't scare slaves. They educated them. Along the Appian Way, men don't just die. They speak. They whisper through cracked lips. Through blood and flies. Through agony stretched across days. They tell anyone who will listen that Rome can be fought. That Rome can be wounded. That Rome is not a god. And Rome knows it. So they do what empires always do when the truth threatens to spread. They rewrite. They reduce Spartacus to a footnote. A criminal. A savage. They strip away intelligence. Strategy. Humanity. They make sure children learn names like Caesar, Pompey, Crassus. Not Spartacus. But the damage is already done. Roman landowners begin sleeping with knives under their pillows. Patrols double. Punishments grow harsher. Because fear has entered the system. And fear rots institutions from the inside. Crassus returns to Rome as a hero. Publicly. Privately, he is furious. Because he didn't get what he wanted. He wanted glory. He wanted a clean victory. He wanted Spartacus' body. Instead, Pompey arrives late to the war and claims credit for mopping up survivors. Politics devours honor. Crassus learns the final lesson Spartacus taught Rome. You don't need to win battles to change history. You need to expose weakness. Crassus will spend the rest of his life trying to erase that feeling. He will die years later in Parthia, lured into negotiations, then killed and humiliated, molten gold poured down his throat. Rome will pretend that death has nothing to do with Spartacus. It does. Because once fear enters a man, it never truly leaves. There is a Roman mother who walks the Appian Way years after the revolt. Her son was one of the crucified. A soldier who deserted. A boy who thought following Spartacus meant freedom. She finds his body long after the birds have done their work. She doesn't scream. She doesn't curse Rome. She cuts him down herself and buries what remains in secret. That night, she tells her other children the story. Not of rebellion. Of choice. She tells them that Rome is powerful, but not permanent. That story survives. Quietly. Dangerously. Now consider the final irony. Rome crushes Spartacus to preserve slavery. Within a century, slavery begins to rot Rome from the inside. Too many slaves. Too few citizens. Too much reliance on fear. The Republic collapses. The Empire rises. Civil wars erupt. Legions fight legions. Romans kill Romans by the tens of thousands. The monster Spartacus threatened to unleash was already inside Rome. Spartacus didn't create the crisis. He revealed it. And now, let's return to Mount Vesuvius one last time. Because there is a detail most people miss. The vines. Historians mention them briefly. Casually. As if improvisation were an accident. It wasn't. Thracian warfare emphasized terrain. Deception. Asymmetry. Spartacus didn't think of something clever. He applied principles Rome had forgotten how to defend against. Rome believed roads won wars. Spartacus proved wild ground could too. That lesson will echo centuries later. In guerrilla warfare. In revolutions. In every moment where a smaller force defeats a larger one by refusing to fight on the enemy's terms. This is why Spartacus is remembered, despite Rome's efforts. Not because he was flawless. Not because he won. But because he broke the illusion. He showed that power is not invincible. Only brittle. And now we come to the final truth. Spartacus was never trying to overthrow Rome. That's another lie. He was trying to leave it. To escape its gravity. And Rome couldn't allow that. Because if slaves learned they could simply walk away, the entire system would collapse. So Rome had to make an example. And examples linger. Long after the crosses rot. Long after the bones turn to dust. And now, there's only one thing left. The meaning. The reason you stayed to the end. Because history isn't about dates. It's about permission. Spartacus gave permission to imagine a different outcome. And that's why his story survives, no matter how hard empires try to bury it. In the final part, you're going to hear the closing truth. The one that gives this story weight. The one that separates myth from memory. And when it's over, you won't just know what happened. You'll understand why it still matters. Imagine walking the Appian Way at dawn. The road is quiet now. Too quiet. The birds have already eaten. The dogs have already learned where the scraps fall. The smell never fully leaves, it lingers in the stone itself, soaked into the cracks, baked in by the sun. 6,000 crosses once stood here. 6,000 men who believed, even for a moment, that the world could be different. Rome wanted this road to be a lesson. It failed. Because lessons change over time. What was meant to terrify became a reminder. Not of punishment. Of possibility. There is a lie people repeat about Spartacus. They say he lost. They say Rome won. But ask yourself something uncomfortable. If Rome truly won, why are you still hearing his name 2,000 years later? Why does no one remember the soldiers who crucified him? Why did Rome erase his body but preserve his fear? Because Spartacus didn't need to survive to succeed. He didn't need a crown. He didn't need a throne. He needed one thing. To prove that obedience was not natural. That chains only work if the mind accepts them. And once that idea escapes, you cannot recapture it. There is one last human story history almost lost. A boy. No older than 12. He walks beside the rebel column in its final days. He doesn't fight. He carries water. Food scraps. Sometimes messages. His father died at Capua. His mother disappeared somewhere between Vesuvius and the Alps. This rebellion is all he has left. On the night before the final battle, he sits near Spartacus. Close enough to hear him breathe. Spartacus notices the boy watching him. He hands the boy his own cloak. The only thing he has left that isn't bloodstained. The boy asks a question no historian recorded, but every human recognizes. Will we be free tomorrow? Spartacus doesn't answer immediately. Then he says, "You already are. You're just still walking." The boy survives the battle. Somehow. He disappears into Italy. No one records his name. But he grows up. He tells the story. And that story spreads quietly. From slave to slave. From parent to child. From whispered memory to whispered memory. Rome never finds him. Rome never silences him. That is Spartacus' final victory. Because history isn't controlled by those who write laws. It's controlled by those who pass stories forward. Rome tried to make Spartacus a warning. Instead, they made him a signal. A flare fired into the future. And here's the truth most people never hear. The Battle of Mount Vesuvius wasn't about genius tactics. It was about perspective. Rome saw cliffs as walls. Spartacus saw them as paths. Rome saw slaves as tools. Spartacus saw them as men. Rome believed control was permanent. Spartacus proved it was conditional. That's why this story still matters. Because every system that relies on fear eventually creates its own Spartacus. Not always with swords. Sometimes with words. Sometimes with ideas. Sometimes with nothing but refusal. And now, you know the real story. Not the clean version. Not the heroic fantasy. The brutal, human truth. A man born in chains refused to die quietly. An empire trembled, not because he almost won, but because he showed others they could try. You stayed. You listened. You walked the road Rome wanted you to fear. And now you carry the same thing those slaves carried out of Capua. Not weapons. Not armor. Awareness. And awareness is the one thing empires cannot crucify. You now know a story most people will never hear. And once you know it, you can never unknow it. That is Spartacus' final legacy. Not victory. Not defeat. But the moment the impossible became imaginable.